Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Chartered Banker Institute Fireside Chat. In these discussions, we meet with figures in and around our banking profession. It is mid-October, and here in the UK, we are facing the prospect of autumnal weather. Whilst our guest, in a different time zone completely, and in a balmy, warm Florida. I'm Bill McCall, past president of the Chartered Banker Institute, and talking to you tonight from Scotland. In the course of the next hour, we will cover a number of topics affecting banking and bankers in the US, with some salutary lessons for us in Europe, the Far East, and the world. And so to our international members out there watching live, or many of you I know will be watching this on catch-up after the event in your own time zone, you are most welcome and thank you for tuning in. Collectively, we are the Chartered Banker Institute, a membership organisation for bankers with around 30,000 members around the world, established in the UK in 1875 by charter by Queen Victoria. So that's a really long time ago. And our 150th anniversary not so far away. Now, contrary to common belief, I wasn't around in those very early years, and I am a relatively new member by comparison. Now, Alex Sanchez is our guest today. Alex is a long-term friend of our institute, a visiting lecturer for the Chartered Banker MBA programme in Bangor, Wales, and the serving president and chief executive of the Florida Bankers Association since 1993. He escaped Cuba with his mother on a JFK's administration-sponsored freedom flight a year after his father had been smuggled out of the country to Spain. The family reunited in the Bronx, in New York, and later settled in Florida, where he lives still. He read law. He also served in the United States Air Force. But enough about Alex. His wife Patsy's story of escape from Cuba is even more remarkable and should be a movie. Now, Alex is no stranger to the small screen, and he will soon be a regular fixture on Maria Bartiromo's must-watch program on US TV. Alex, welcome back to the Chartered Banker Institute. It's a great pleasure to see you, albeit it's 8 degrees here in Scotland, and I'm not even going to ask you if you have air conditioning running or not. Now,
Thank you.
A pleasure to have you. Now, when we last spoke, Alex, the pandemic was raging in both your country and ours, and sadly, claiming thousands of lives. And we know that a couple of million people, sadly, have died around the world. And we've witnessed, both here in the UK and other countries, but you know from the US, big government step in with job supports, loans, grants, all manner of things to try and alleviate the impact. Can you give those of us not in your neck of the woods a sort of quick update of where your great state of Florida is? As I suspect many of us over on this side of the pond would like to get back there just as soon as we possibly can. So Alex, what's the state of play in Florida from a healthcare perspective right now?
Great. Thank you, Bill, and thanks for inviting me. I appreciate everything that you and Simon Thompson do within the Chartered Banker Institute. And you're right, it's a great institution which continues to educate our bankers and keeps our bankers on the cutting edge of every aspect of society. And that's important as they serve the public to enhance their economic vitality. So thank you for inviting me. On the question of Florida, let me just say that, Bill, Governor Ron DeSantis, our governor in the state of Florida, when the pandemic hit in 2020, like everyone else, we were scrambling for information, scrambling to see what was this all about? We were all in a state of shock that this could even happen in today's world. The governor took leadership, strong leadership, and obviously the first 2 months until we could get the proper medical information and other information, a lot of the state was closed, but the governor got leaders together, both from the medical profession and the economic side of the house, to reopen the state of Florida. And he did it in phases, depending on the area of the state you were at. The more populated areas where the pandemic was in higher percentages remained closed. And then the rest came into phase 1, and then gradually other parts came into phase 2, and then other parts that were closed came into phase 1, and then eventually the whole entire state went into phase 3. What did that mean? That meant that the restaurants in phase 1 can only have 25% capacity, and then a little higher capacity in phase 2, to gradually reopen. And I think Governor Ron DeSantis did a great job, unlike other states like California and New York, where hundreds and hundreds of small businesses failed, because in the first 2 months of the pandemic, the big box retailers were open, so you could go buy a bicycle at Walmart, but you couldn't buy it at Bill's bike store, which was totally unfair to the small business owner. So that changed here in Florida right away, and through the government's action of creating these paycheck protection program, billions actually of dollars were processed in loans to small businesses, and any of those loans, 150,000 or less, was forgiven by the federal government. That really helped a lot of our small businesses, Bill, survive this pandemic to get them to the other side. So we feel good in Florida, and in general in the United States. Pretty much everything is open now in the U.S. Florida's remained open and will stay open as we hopefully get more people vaccinated, and through herd immunity, we come out of this pandemic, Bill.
So I guess, Alex, the message for you as wearing your day job hat for the Florida Bankers Association is you're welcoming new businesses to Florida as people relocate from the Midwest and other parts of the Northeastern seaboard. So the population of Florida is increasing considerably month on month. There are new headquarters being established for organizations that may have been in the Upper East Coast, even on the West Coast, because people simply want to be there. And it's not all about taxation, be other aspects. So the other side of the balance sheet, though, so we've read here in the rest of the world about the increasing US national debt, a lot of it running to provide for some of those very relief schemes that you taught, almost an FDR type situation in some cases. We read that the federal government, and for those watching, remembering that Florida is a state with its own legislature, but there is the federal government that sits on top, right, that the Fed government would run out of cash. So disaster has been averted, but I know you keep a close eye on the national debt. Now, for us in the UK, we've got eye-watering debts, but I think you're at 33 trillion or something or thereby. Is that fair?
That is, Bill. We're technically not at 33. We're at 29 trillion. But once we start spending a lot of these pieces of legislation that have been passed in the last few months, once we start spending those monies, we'll be at 33 and probably 35 trillion by the new year. Bill, look, that's an excellent question, and I think every country, certainly every democracy, needs to be concerned about the national debt of its own country, because you can't spend, look, we as individuals, we cannot spend money we don't have. And in our own households, we balance our books to make sure that we're spending what we're taking in, and not anymore. Credit is I guess you can say credit is a necessary evil in society. You know, we all use credit cards, but you got to pay it off. You got to pay it off at some point. And I'm concerned that in the United States, our debt now is going to hit 30 trillion and beyond here shortly. And to put things in perspective, Bill, just 21 years ago, our national debt stood at $5 trillion, which seems like chump change when you compare it to today's numbers. So, Japan, China, the UK, Canada, and other countries buy our treasury securities. But, at some point, something's going to go wrong. And I don't want to be in the position that we're in right now of having so much debt in our country. And we need to take it seriously and start putting that down payment on that credit card.
So when we look at the new administration that was elected and the ebb and flow and arm wrestling that goes on between the two-party system that you've got, from where you sit in Florida, is there any chance in your view that bipartisanship will return for the greater good? Or are we now in the new realpolitik of it's left and right and never the twain shall meet? Is the answer not to have compromise?
Bill, I hope we do. Well, in every democracy, we need that for the good of the country. Both sides, whether it's the Tories and the Labor Party in your great country, or the Republicans and Democrats here, or in other countries using their political parties. Both sides have to get together for the good of the country. And yes, you're always going to have political bickering. That's part of a democratic process. Not everybody's going to agree. This is not China, where there's a one-party system and a president for life, President Xi. And what he says goes. No questions asked. No, in a democracy, you have debate. You have to massage it. You have compromise. But as Ronald Reagan once said, if you agree with me on majority of issues, you're my friend and we can work together. That's what I think we need to do in the United States. The bickering needs to end. But you know what happens, Bill? Politicians don't tend to act until the very end, until their backs are to the edge of the cliff. And that's sad. I look, sometimes I ask myself, where are the leaders today? Where are the Winston Churchills of the world? Where are the Ronald Reagans of the world? Where are the John Kennedys of the world? We need strong leaders who, as Miss President Kennedy once said, which is a saying that we've long forgotten here in the United States, don't ask what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. The words of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
I spoke, and it was a privilege for me to speak to Sir Peter Wall, General Sir Peter Wall, who was head of the British Army from around 2010 to 2014, during the time of Afghanistan and the early parts of those things. And his view was we have a leadership deficit, and in fact, politics doesn't attract the right kind of leader. Let's just set politics aside for the moment, because we could spend an hour discussing it. But on to more economic matters. Quantitative easing, which has been the money printing that's been going on in the US and elsewhere, including here, will taper. I mean, the various authorities are beginning to say that will wind down. Inflation, price inflation is running up. We are seeing that, partly driven by supply, partly driven by commodity prices that are being driven up. Surely it's just a matter of time before interest rates go up. And then going back to the earlier point about that national debt, your federal government is paying $400 billion a year in interest.
Right.
So a 1% move on the Fed rate or the Treasury rate or their funding rate is a huge chunk of money. So is that a wrong premise, or is that where you might see parts of the US going? Because I do know that you have economies within the economy, and averages for the whole of the US are very dangerous things, because you have some states doing remarkably well and others not so. But is that a fair comment?
It is, Bill, and just a couple of comments to answer your question. look, earlier you talked about Florida, gaining a lot. Every state in the United States has its own tax policy, regulatory policy, and then of course, we have to follow federal law that preempts state law in the United States. But it does allow a lot of leeway to states to compete with each other. And Florida, you're right, is gaining a lot of population, a lot of companies, because people are tired of the high tax environments of Connecticut, of New York, of New Jersey, the older part of the United States. We call Florida and the rest of these states down here in the South, the Sun Belt. So newer, everything's newer here because we're not as old as New York, for instance. And so people are tired of living up there, and politicians up there keep raising taxes every year. They're tired of that because they keep asking, what are you doing with the money? So Florida does not have an income tax. So to put things in perspective, we had 2 million citizens here in the 1950s in the state of Florida. We have 23 million, and as you said, growing by 1,000 a day. Now, as far as interest rates, shifting to that for the United States, I think you make a good point, Bill, because of the current service on the debt of over $400 billion. I believe, Bill, that we're in a low interest environment for the next decade. I think we're the new Japan. You're going to see rates at 1.5, 1. In other recessions, as we recovered from those recessions, our Bank of England, the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States, would raise rates to taper off inflation, to cool off the economy, just so it wouldn't get out of hand. And the rates would go up to 4, 5 or so percent. We've been stuck at 1 or so for the last decade, and that's going to continue, I believe. And you're right, inflation is a concern. Last comment on your question, Bill, because it had so many multifaceted, excellent points. I think one of the lessons of the pandemic is for the UK, for many other countries, including the United States, is looking at the supply chain. Where are we getting our products? And especially the strategic products like pharmaceuticals. Where are we getting those things? And we learned a very, very difficult answer to that question, and that is China. And I think we need to disengage and make sure that our pharmaceutical companies start producing it in either at home or more friendly allied nations, and not depend on China, because China can turn on the spigot and turn it off as well. So that's a major lesson that we've learned from this pandemic.
Well, we may come on to that supply chain point, because I have a chart I'll share with the audience shortly. But also, it's not a bad thing to have a little bit of inflation nibbling away at the value of the national debt. You know, the debt is being nibbled away at by the inflationary rate. Now, Alex, I know as an ex-serviceman, you follow the military goings-on in a geopolitical basis. There's been much written about Afghanistan and the exit from Afghanistan. And we are beginning to see, even from a business perspective, a bipolar world with the let's call it the US gang and the China gang. And the UK and the US have signed a new submarine deal with Australia, our partner in that part of the world that's quite strategic and quite important. We have a high number of members of our institute in that part of the world. And I know they'll be particularly interested in an ex-American serviceman banker's view of life. The deal there is really important. And it wasn't lost to many of us that the lithium deposits in Afghanistan are probably of high importance and real need to the biggest battery manufacturer in the world in the form of China. What is the view, and it may be a personal view of the exit from Afghanistan after that brutal time there?
Bill, the lesson of Afghanistan, look, we went in there to liberate with the allied nations, all went in after 9/11 to take out Osama bin Laden and his cronies, who were cowards. They were cowards. They were terrorists, and killing innocent people around the world. and we accomplish that mission. A lesson that our countries and others that were helpful in this campaign is we're not nation builders. We're liberators, and we liberated Afghanistan. But to change the mindset and the country, it's very difficult. This is not Germany 1945. It's a whole new ball game, and we're going to have to strategically use our military, especially our air power, to engage when necessary if the Taliban and their allies start acting up and start behaving like terrorists again. I feel sorry for the people of Afghanistan, especially, I'm a father of 2 daughters, Bill. The girls can't go to school. Come on, this is 2021, people, wake up. The reign of terror of the Taliban against their own people is horrific. But, keeping British and American and other soldiers there day in and day out for an endless war, it just wasn't the answer either. The United States spent $1 billion a day in Afghanistan. And at the end of the day, look what happened. The Afghan army, after tens and hundreds of billions of dollars of training and armaments, ran away. It was so disappointing, Bill, so disappointing that the Afghan government could not sustain itself. So we're not nation builders. And nobody likes an endless war. And so on the question of now what happens to Afghanistan, look who came in right away, China, to sign a deal to suck the minerals out of those Afghan mountains full of lithium. And so, China once again will hold a very key strategic mineral that is in great need around the world as we try to get greener in our policies and get away from the fossil fuel industries. China, once again, is going to play a key role in that. But quite frankly, I was embarrassed the way the United States, the Biden administration handled the exiting of Afghanistan. I think we could have handled that better. I think that was a failure by President Biden. But look, we're out of there. It's over. And the Taliban better behave. If not, they're going to be seeing our F-35s and our F-16s and our F-15s.
Yeah, so I guess the lessons from history are the American experience with allies in Afghanistan. There have been previous follies in Afghanistan with Russia, who had a problem there. The British Empire in the late 1800s, a similar issue. It has been the folly of many Western powers. You mentioned climate change. That's a very helpful segue into the climate emergency that is being faced by our planet. The world leaders, with some notable exceptions, I should say, will meet in Scotland very soon for the COP26 gathering. Where's the US financial sector? The politicians will do what they do, but where's the real position for the US financial sector? The banks that you speak for and represent in Florida, what's going on so far as their agenda on climate change and decarbonization and moving to a more efficient, renewable economy?
Bill, look, we all care about the environment. We all care about carbon emissions. We live here. I mean, we work here, we live here, we play here. And whatever state you live in the United States or wherever you live around the world, we care about the environment, of course. It's very important. But the politicalization of this issue is unwarranted and not necessary against our banks. The regulators want to use our banks to enforce their green energy policies against customers that we serve. My comeback to them is, don't put the banks in the position of being the carbon police. That's not our role. Our role is to enhance the economic vitality of the individuals and communities we serve, and to put us in the middle of, especially for our smaller community banks, Bill, but only and our regional banks as well, but really everyone, to hire carbon emissions experts to stress test our loan portfolios, to basically rid ourselves of fossil fuel customers who use fossil fuel. That's not the role of banks. If the government wants information, or if the government wants to make illegal and not legal a certain industry or a certain a process that uses fossil fuels, they should pass a law and do that. Our banks will bank legal businesses. But to ask our bankers to become the carbon emissions police, the climate police, is wrong. The bankers should have the right, through risk management, to make their own decision as to who they bank. And if it's a legal business, we should have the right to make that decision ourselves. That is our position. But I think the regulators in the United States and the politicians are trying to kind of make us the scapegoat to enforce their green energy policies by putting the bankers in the middle of it. And that is incorrect, and that's wrong.
So we may come back to the dichotomy of government becoming banker, by straying into that area. And I know there are other areas that we'll get on to. You mentioned the community banks and your more regional banks, and then we've got the Wall Street v. Main Street debate. Surely all of these community banks can't hire all of these specialists that they need to police. I guess that's the point. Are there opportunities, though, for those banks that see it as an opportunity? Within our institute, our objective is to have lending bankers who understand good stewardship. And good stewardship is about responsible lending, responsible banking, making sure that there's something there for the next day. It's not all about the gain and the profit made in the short term. It's about leaving it for the next person and all of those things. I know that many of your community banks are family owned. They're owned by some families or small groups. They have lunch with their clients, the clients intimately. They probably have their kids go to school together, all of those things. Do you see that as a strength, or is that being challenged at the moment?
It's a strength, and it continues to be. Community banks in this country, they're as big as one branch, 10 branches, 60 branches, and thereabouts. And they fly closer to the ground, with their ear closer to the ground. And while community banks, Bill, in the United States only have 20% of the overall market share, they provide 50% of the small business loans in the US to small businesses. And why does that matter? Because, the small business sector is vital to our economy in the US. 50% of Americans work for small businesses. Yes, everybody wants a big business, an international business, a conglomerate in their backyard. But the reality is that the main employer in our country and in most countries is a small business. So community banks play that role of funding the startup of small businesses in our entrepreneurial society. We have tens of thousands of small businesses that start up every year. And so that's an important role to fund these small businesses that community banks play, and our regional banks as well. So, so that personal relationship banking does continue, Bill. So
the UK it's a very similar profile. The very large scale employers make a lot of headlines, and in fact, in the UK, some of the banks are in that category. There probably are around 2,000 enterprises in the UK that are the very largest scale employers. There are 6 million businesses, with the vast majority, and there are probably another 6 or 7 million with 1 or 2 employees. So, it gives you an idea of the pyramid. It's very, very thin at the top in the UK, and the consolidation that's going on amongst the biggest of the big internationally means there are fewer and fewer international businesses headquartered in your own country. You see mergers and acquisitions happening even amongst community banks, because I guess there are banks out with Florida are looking jealously at your demographic, your booming economy, the property portfolio of the market, the big employers, the software companies coming in, and they need a banking license in Florida. So the only way really to do that is to go buy one, isn't it?
That's correct, Bill. I mean, it's the quickest way to get instant market share in a growing, dynamic market like the state of Florida, the third largest state now in the United States behind California and Texas. So you're absolutely correct. And many of our community banks, really many of them have not wanted to sell out. But again, the offers were just too good to be too good, and they were true, and then they sold out. But the other reason that we've had M&A activity in our industry, especially among community bankers, is that a lot of them are tired of the regulatory, this thought of this carbon emissions, hiring a carbon emissions expert. We can talk about that IRS proposal by the Biden administration, which is they're asking that banks track and report to the Internal Revenue Service every 600 or more transaction that every American citizen makes at their bank account, whether they withdraw 600, deposit 600 or more, transfer 600, or invest 600, or any other transaction of $600 or more. And that hasn't happened yet. We're opposing this, but these are the type of regulatory threats that are making operating a community bank much more expensive. And some people just have had enough. And that's too bad, Bill, because we need community banks, as we need all banks of every sector to service our economy.
So in the UK, we have credit unions, which I guess would have been very similar to savings and loans. And they in many communities are the only bank available to the unbanked. And one of the key things that we see as a strength of our institute is encouraging those who wouldn't ordinarily have a career in banking to be supported through our 2025 foundation to try and find a career within the banking profession, because only by that diversification will we be able to get to the unbanked, I suspect. And in our Young Banker of the Year final, which was held just a week ago, the winner there, and it's online for those who haven't seen it live, the proposal there was quite startling for those who are affected by domestic abuse, for instance. Banks should be caring about people who are in those really difficult, tricky situations. The winner last year was talking about a specific account for those who maybe had been hurt or upset, damaged by some kind of catastrophic injury in their earlier life or whatever. So as bankers, we have this stewardship point. It's not all about trading rooms on Wall Street and the City of London. Right. It's about putting money to use in communities. That's right. And making a fair return, right, but being partners alongside the entrepreneurs and people who want to crack on. Now, you opened the box on the IRS $600 transaction limit. Many of our audience watching may not know about this. So this is, again, government coming into banking and suggesting that all transactions over $600 be reported. And the genesis of this, Alex, is the Biden administration and other governments, other administrations in the US have also said there is untaken tax in the system. And I think every country in the world has that, whether it be the highest net worth, offshore, whatever, clever tax planning, whatever, right down to somebody not declaring, being paid as a restaurant worker or whatever. But it strikes me that looking in on it, they're going for the biggest part of the pyramid, but asking the banks to administer it. Am I correct, or is
you're absolutely right? With the Biden
broadly right? Maybe you can explain.
You're right, Bill. You're absolutely on point. And here's the concern we have. It's an incredible intrusion of privacy for every American to have every one of their $600 or more transactions at a bank, deposit, withdrawal, transfer, sent to the Internal Revenue Service. Americans don't trust the Internal Revenue Service. The Internal Revenue Service was really politicized highly during the Obama administration when companies and groups and were audited based on certain political beliefs. And since that time, the disregard and the distrust of the IRS has only risen highly by every American. So people are asking themselves, why does the Biden administration want to know every $600 transaction? If we're all in favor of making sure the government collects the proper tax revenues to fund our nation's needs. Nobody can argue about that. We certainly don't. But our suggestion to the Biden administration, and I've said this on Maria Barantaromo's show 2 weeks ago, look, go after the high earning tax evaders, individuals and corporations, and audit them. Hire more auditors and audit them and make sure that everyone's paying their fair share of taxes. But to go after, as a term that we use here in America, Joe and Jane six-pack, the ordinary blue-collar American workers, the waiter down the street that made $300 in tips, for 2 nights, you're getting breadcrumbs there. Go after the big, high tax earners who have things offshore, who are using all sorts of shell corporations. They're the ones they should be targeting, not the everyday hardworking American. So, and then, of course, this puts our banks in the deputy positions of working for the IRS. And who's going to pay the hundreds of millions of dollars, Bill, that, especially for our smaller community banks, that they'll have to pay to create IT systems to capture this massive amount of information? The bank will, and it will kill our community banks. It will just kill them. They don't have the funds to be able to invest in these type of IT systems. I'd rather have, to all the bankers listening in globally, as I make this comment, you can greatly sympathize with me. I'd rather have all banks globally, wherever you may be listening in tonight, hire more lenders to lend money so that people can achieve the dream of home ownership or business ownership than to hire more compliance staff.
Yeah, as an equal employer, we love our compliance staff. I should say that, Alex. We love our compliance staff, but that's the purpose of banking isn't necessarily that first.
Right.
So if I understand this correctly, because I am moderately confused by it. I am a very simple Scotsman at the end of the day. This means that there would be some onus on the banks to report up the line transactions of $600 and above, or to capture them through some data capture, and then for there to be some interface with the IRS through to someone's tax returns to capture undeclared cash or whatever it may be. I'm just wondering, even in let's say a community bank in Winter Garden or Winter Park, somewhere in Florida, that's a regular place. How many transactions over $600 would the regular one branch organization have on a weekly basis? I don't expect you to know the number, but I'm guessing it's significant.
It is, Bill. And you know what? I think we know the answer, what the waiter down the street might do with his $400, $600 tips that he would normally deposit at his local bank if this passes. So I think, we have a program here. I know, Bill, my immigrant parents, when we first came to America, one of the first things they did, as you would do in the UK, as you would do in any country if you're an immigrant, the first step to financial viability is opening up a bank account. That's so essential. It's important. It's like breathing. You need that. But how many people would go unbanked now if this were to pass? So that's very concerning, because to begin to build wealth and create wealth, the opening of a bank account is essential to do that. And so I think the Biden administration's out of touch, and even some moderate Democrats are starting to rise up here in opposition to this. And we hope that continues through this month and early into next month. And hopefully this measure will be defeated, Bill.
So I suppose your members are looking at the prospect of having to administer this on behalf of the government. And I guess what will happen is that Joe and Jane Sixpack, as you described them, will simply deposit an awful lot of $599.
Right.
The fleet of foot generally find workarounds in this circumstance. And I suppose with the Panama Papers and Pandora Papers and all of these things showing, what's going on in offshore tax planning and asset owning and everything else, it would seem that is a significant target to run at. That probably might yield a bigger tax take, you would think. Alex, on a lighter note, I know you're a big fan of baseball. We spoke about that before. Your football season is off and running, although we would call it American football because we're all about the original association football game. And then we've got rugby, which is basically your football for people who really just want to not wear pads and smash each other up. There is an autumn series coming, and in Murrayfield in Scotland and Edinburgh, the Scottish team will play the world champions, South Africa. Wow. There's a whole bunch of things going on.
Wow.
Now,
don't you guys win it every year? Don't you guys win it every rugby championship? No,
it's kind of you to say. Just because our tough exterior suggests we should, we don't often. But we win in the bar stakes afterwards, I suspect. So the question is, if you were presented with the opportunity to host a dinner for anyone in history, alive or dead, who would you be inclined to have round your table? I ask this of quite a number of people I meet because it gives quite a lot about the way you tick. And there are some names that come up time and time again, but there are others. So I know I'm putting you on the spot, and it's not even near dinner time for you. It's kind of arriving that here. So who would your fantasy dinner guest be?
Well, Bill, on my coffee table right back here, so I have his book, so I'm not pandering to you and Simon and our friends in the United Kingdom. But my first dinner guest would be Winston Churchill, Sir Winston Churchill. I would love to sit down with him and ask him how did he survive the bombing of London, the coming over here to meet with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to urge him to get involved in the war in Europe, where our country thought, oh, the Europeans they're back at it again, another war over there. No, this was much more than that. And Sir Winston carried that burden on his shoulders in coming here time and time again to meet with Mr. Roosevelt. And then finally, of course, after Pearl Harbor, our great country joined your great country to defeat one of the nexuses of evil, Hitler's Nazi Germany force. And so I would love to ask him, about how did he do it? How did he gain that strength? And becoming, the prime minister after Neville Chamberlain resigned when he got back from Berlin and trying to work out a deal with Hitler, and that backfired on him when he got back to London. I would love to sit down with Winston Churchill. Another person I'd love to sit down with is President Ronald Reagan. He took over in a time where we were coming out of the hostage situation in Iran, and America was perceived to be a weak country, and he went on to rebuild our armed services, our armed forces, and to rebuild America, and mainly to gain, for Americans to regain confidence in our country again. And he united us. He worked with Democrats, he worked with Republicans, he worked with everybody. I would love to sit down with President Reagan to ask him, how did you do it, sir? What was the loneliest night you had, and what were you thinking? What was the lowest point you had, and how did you turn the ship around? I would love to do that. And another person I would like to sit down with is Dr. Martin Luther King. I would love to, Dr. King is one of my heroes. I think he made America a greater nation, and he, through peace and civil disobedience, which is important. Not rioting, not burning, not looting. Dr. King was about civil disobedience. And to ask him, how did he do that? How did he hang in there during the toughest of days? Those are three, great human beings that I think truly, Bill, could say when they left this world, they left the world a better place than when they came into it.
Well, thank you for your candor, Alex. I'll add those to my list as I'm building a list of a variety of people. Just for your edification, I've had Sir Paul McCartney mentioned. I know you would like him. I also, curiously, someone said Debbie Harry, who's Blondie, the pop singer, and then some others from the entertainment world. And someone actually very close to me had suggested that one of the greatest tenors of all time, Caruso, would have been one of their guests. So the question you asked was, how did Winston Churchill get through? I suspect, tongue in cheek, I say with lots of brandy and plenty of cigars would be the answer. Now, we talked about supply chain, and forgive my fingers on the screen. I'm just going to show you a couple of things. This, if I step out of the way,
sure,
is a chart of ships waiting to get into ports on your west coast.
Wow.
So what that tells me is there is a shipping problem. There's a supply chain issue right there. So the number of ships sitting offshore, and I can't quite show you this is over a period of 3 months or 4 months. Right. So there is a congestion problem with container ships off your west coast. And this is a live position. Wow. That's shipping in and around your country right now. And you can see the great state of Florida there on the right-hand side, and up towards Jacksonville and beyond, up towards Georgia, the huge amount of shipping. But look at that west coast. Many of those container ships are stuck. They are going nowhere. They've got real issues, and things are a considerable problem for them. So I wonder, are you seeing inventory in electronics slowing down? Are you beginning to see things from the Far East problematic? Or is there a risk that the Thanksgiving holiday season, Christmas, will be problematical for anything with a chip in it?
Bill, yes, I think so. And again, it highlights what you're saying, the fixation that we have with overseas products, and I know global trade is good, it's healthy, it's important in our world, but over reliance on trade with one particular country, I think, is dangerous. And I think I served on the XM advisory board for the XM Import-Export Bank of the United States, and the Made in China 2025 program that China is currently undergoing. And the goal of that program is to, by 2025, dominate every country in the world with a Made in China products, so that those countries will be dependent on that because it's cheaper. And once you start depending on it in a sense that you're so dependent on them that you don't even have your own industry to manufacture those products. That is the goal of China, so that we would depend on them. I think that's dangerous. I think that's dangerous for the economy of that sovereign nation. And the United States and all our allies, including the United Kingdom, have to reassess our trade imbalances that we have in the hundreds of billions of dollars every year with China. And that's what causes this graph that you're showing. So we better wake up. It's a wake-up call. China is not a friend, it's a foe. and they have certain goals and minds that are not within our democratic and freedom-loving objectives that we enjoy in countries like the United Kingdom, in the United States, and many other countries around the world. China has other goals. And so we have better start taking care of issues and confronting them versus kicking them down the road.
I guess, Alex, the power of a democracy is the freedom of choice, right? So you don't have to buy goods or services from someone you may not want to. Those supply chain issues are alive and well in the UK as well. We have significant issues. There's a confluence of events, I suppose. So our time for everyone who's watching us either live today, or I know many of our viewers, Alex, come in the days after, because it's only a certain demographic that watches things live these days. Mm-hmm. There are generations, your daughters, my kids, they do not watch terrestrial inline television. That's a foreign thing. They tend to do it on demand when they want to do it. The old days of the family sitting down at the appointed hour on the appointed day to watch a particular television program is a bygone thing. So as we reach the end of our time together, I'd like to thank you all for watching. And to those of you who I know are studying for imminent institute examinations in the next little while, the very best of fortune in your endeavours. Study hard. It shouldn't be easy. We look forward to seeing more chartered bankers joining the profession in due course, and it shouldn't be easy because it's important and valuable. To Emma O'Sullivan, who's the unseen hand at the Institute, for arranging this session. Thank you, Emma. It's always a pleasure when someone who is so technically there and handling these events gets it organised. Also in the background, you can see its photo there, our Chief Executive at the Institute, Simon Thompson. He is a leading light in eco-finance, green finance, and everything the Institute is carrying out. Simon is very much at the helm with his executive group and the wonderful group of people who staff our Institute in the UK. Importantly, though, to our guest, Alex Sanchez, our collective thanks, Alex. It's not goodbye. It's that unique Scottish farewell where we say, haste ye back. And that's an encouragement, not to leave it too long before we see you again. Our warmest regards from your adoptive institute. We feel that you are very much part of our family, and we wish you well next time you're over in Bangor talking to the MBA students there. One thought to close, and we've heard much of the hand of government in all aspects of finance today, arriving more and more in the daily of the finance sector. I pick a celebrated line from a celebrated man of thought, hailing from the town of Kirkcaldy in Fife, Scotland, a student of the Professor of Moral Philosophy at the University of Glasgow. The celebrated Francis Hutcheson was the professor there. This individual later took that seat as the Professor of Moral Philosophy at the University of Glasgow, where the business school now carries the name, the Adam Smith Business School. Now, Adam Smith, the father of economics, is often hijacked and misquoted for all sorts of purposes. He said, and this is a lesson for those who rule and lead us, it is the highest impertinence of kings and ministers to pretend to watch over the economy of private people and to restrain their expense. They themselves always and without exception are the greatest spendthrifts in the society. Let them look well after their own expense and they may safely trust private people with theirs. If their own extravagance does not ruin the state, that of their subjects never will. And I suspect, Alex, that was well ahead of looking at the $600 IRS inspection from around 1776, which might also be a significant date for an American. So, on a brighter note, leaving you with that Smith quote to conjure, I'm looking out to a darkened Scotland at the moment, and the rain is falling. And Alex, it rains a lot in Scotland, but as a Scot, I'm always comforted that in a few years' time, those drops of rain will be beautiful Scotch whiskey.
Wow.
With all of that, from the Chartered Banker Institute, from our guest, Alex Sanchez, I'm Bill McCall. Good night. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.